We want to build the biggest and best nursery group in Peterborough.
If we've got to go from here to there in 3 years, what's the likely scale up? So is it specific, is it measurable, is it attainable, is it relevant, and is it time? Someone who's a millionaire that wants to be a billionaire is an abject failure. Every area of the business is interdependent on the other areas.
And that's really interesting because I never thought of them as two separate businesses.
I'm here today with Leigh. I've known Leigh for some time. And Leigh is in the process of setting up a new business. So we're here, we're going to do a live mentoring session. Hopefully you enjoy that. And Leigh and I are going to talk about that business and give Leigh the start of a plan to move forward with.
Yeah, sounds great.
So good with you, Leigh? So
yeah,
as I was saying, known you on the property development side. You and Charlotte are now getting into a new business. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my background has been in property development and I've been doing that for 12 years now. And what I have always done has been very much deal driven. So it has always been buying a building, getting planning permission, selling it or developing it. But what I never had along the way was a regular source of income. Right. So I've always been looking at, well, for the last few years especially, I've been looking at getting involved in a business where we can really create something that provides regular cash flow, regular income, and something that we can scale. But it had to be something that we could bring expertise into. So Charlotte, my wife, is a primary school teacher and she's an excellent primary school teacher. And I feel like I'm really passionate, really confident when it comes to business and entrepreneurship and that kind of thing. So we thought we would team together and a nursery would be an ideal business for us because it's something where we can bring both of our expertise and something that we think we can really grow and really be passionate about and put a lot of energy into. And the good part about doing property is you can always do that on the side or whatever business you're involved with, property always fits in with that. And it's something you can do for the rest of your life. So it works well for my existing business as well. Yeah, it's complementary. So we spent a little bit of time looking for opportunities. This originally it was in London where we were living, but we moved back to Peterborough where we are now. And since moving back, we were kind of looking for opportunities. And we came across this one nursery, which was about 15 minutes away from where we live. Okay. Originally, it had sold to somebody else. And we kind of came too late. You know, when we first saw it, it had already sold to somebody. So
where we're at now, though, is you've got a nursery.
Yeah, so we've got a nursery now.
What's the timing in terms of you starting that, launching that, and you're going into it as an operational nursery? Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's an existing nursery that's already running. It's got a manager in situ. We're at the stage now where we have agreed heads of terms. We have an exclusivity period for the next 12 weeks, and we're just going through the due diligence process, which the solicitor is obviously doing on our behalf.
So it could be 12 weeks time.
It could be 10 weeks, could be sooner.
So to me, it's a great time to be having this conversation because all too often when I'm going into businesses, I'm going in because there is a problem in place and we've got to overcome that problem. So we're looking to a place in the future that might be better, bigger, more profitable, more valuable as a business. But we've got to start almost behind the wire because we're having to overcome issues and restructure that business before we can then propel forward. But this is great because essentially what I've been doing for many years, at least 10, 15 years now, is working on one-page strategic maps. So what I want to say is, where are we today? Where is it we want to be in the future? What areas do we need to work on to get from where we are to where we want to be? And then what initiatives in each of those areas, which we can then break down further and we can allocate to people's responsibilities. But it was interesting when you were talking about Charlotte being a great primary school teacher. And that's the case with a lot of businesses, that they are a great plumber, they are a great programmer, they are a great teacher, and the transition that they need to make is important as part of this transition map as well, because what we need to do is almost say, okay, that's working on the tools as it were, or being a great teacher. Actually, what you need to become is a great business person who employs great teachers, and you might be one of the great teachers within that. But the transition, people often believe, because I'm the best plumber in the area, I'm going to have a massive plumbing business. Because I'm the best computer programmer in the area, I'm going to have the best computer programming business. And actually, we need to elevate away from the doing, because every time you're physically doing what it is that is your skill set, if you're coming from a position like that, you're actually not got your eyes on the broader business. You've not got the perspective on the business, and you may not be looking at the marketing or the finances and everything else. So the whole idea of a combined map that converges together to a future that gives you those returns that you want, that ticks those goals or achieves those goals that you want to achieve, is that we look at all the areas. And obviously in a nursery, we've got loads to think about. It's kind of, you're taking my child. I've been at home with them for 9 months and I'm going to completely entrust them to you.
Yeah.
So obviously reputation becomes a big thing. What's the past reputation? How can we improve on where that is today?
Yeah.
What's the capacity in there? Can we grow that business to the scale? Or do we need to look at growing other nurseries, building that brand out into the area, out into the region, or even nationally? So what thoughts have you had about, so we get this first nursery, if that was our current state, let's say we've got one nursery, how many children do you know that's got roughly?
It's registered for about 30.
So 30.
Between 30 and 35.
30 to 35 children. Yeah. And if we were looking forward to the future, what you've obviously talked with Charlotte about, let's go forward 5 years, let's say.
Yeah.
We do a 3-year plan, but if we've got a really detailed focus plan, often that's the difference between meandering our way to it. So we can actually often achieve 5 years of goals in 3 years if we get the focus plan that keeps us on the right track. So let's say it was a 5-year goal, but we're going to aim to try and concertina that down. Where would you be in 5 years, do you think, in an ideal world, in your dream of where you take that business?
Well, for me, it's very much about building a legacy and building something big. So I wouldn't want to stop at just one nursery. I think the initial plan is to focus on the one, get the formula right, and then be in a position where we can scale it and buy more nurseries or start new nurseries from scratch. So the ultimate goal is to create a nursery group. And that could be 10 nurseries, could be 20, it could be 100.
Yeah.
There are people in the industry that have started with one and gone on to buy 100 nurseries within 5 years. So we know it's in the realms of what we can do. But obviously there's a lot of unknowns along the way. And because it's a new business for us, we don't necessarily know how to run a nursery. We know, I understand business and accounting and that kind of thing, but we don't know the fundamentals.
But we've got a manager in place that's running it now, can run it.
Yeah.
And it's independent of the current owners.
Yes.
Or have you got to suddenly go in and pick up their job?
So it's independent from the owners to an extent.
In a day-to-day.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of involvement from the current owner, but I think the nursery can run on its own. I think the manager can do most things. So there shouldn't be too much pressure on us from day one. But I think we want to be able to learn from the manager, and especially for Charlotte, we need to make sure that Charlotte can replace the manager if she needs to. So she needs to know everything about the business.
She'll do that by shadowing initially?
I think so, yeah, shadowing, working with the manager. And for me, I will probably sit above that and just be the overall kind of outside business part. The way that Charlotte described it, which I quite liked, was that she would be the heart and I would be the head.
Okay. Yeah, and so you're obviously joined up in that sense, but you have separate and different roles, and I think that's quite important in business.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I would say is that when we were talking about where could you be, you said, oh, it could be 10, could be 20, could be 100, because other people have done that.
Yeah.
And often in business is that kind of broad future that people have in their mind. They know they want to grow, but they literally, and we're just chatting here, but that is exactly what people say. Oh, it could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 100. And that's a bit, to me, like jumping into a taxi and saying to the driver, just take me north, mate. I want to go that way, please. And he'll say, come on, give me a hand. Where exactly are you going? Yeah. And even if you then say, take me to Birmingham, well, it's a big city. If you go that side of Birmingham, it's going to be an hour across the city to that side. So ideally, they're wanting an address or a postcode. They're wanting something to be specific.
Okay.
So what and it's become a cliche to talk about SMART goals. And when I mentor, I make notes of the things we talk about and I send a follow-up, but SMART goals. So is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it relevant? And is it timed?
Okay.
So the problem is when we say 10, 20, 100, that's not very specific. That's quite broad.
Okay.
And that's like saying to a taxi driver, can you just take me north?
Yeah.
Now, the reason I use the example of a taxi driver is we've got our conscious, we've got our subconscious, but the thing that most drives us towards the future or changes our behavior is our creative subconscious, which is called our taxi driver. And the problem is people say, oh, I just want to be successful.
Yeah.
Well, what's successful? Is that earning £10 more than I earned last week?
Yeah.
Or is that being a millionaire or a billionaire or having 10 nurseries or 100 nurseries? So even though you don't know exactly how you're going to get there, Just the same, when you get into a taxi, you don't know which route he's going to take, which lefts, which rights, which T-junctions. You're putting your faith in him to get you to that address, or her, once you give them that address specifically. Equally, your creative subconscious is incredible for, once you set it a very specific goal, it's let's say you say, I want to buy one of those new Range Rovers, I'd love to get one. Suddenly you start seeing them everywhere. They were always around you, but your creative subconscious is now alerting you to that, whether it's looking through a magazine, on an advert, or on the road. Equally, when you set more specific goals, your creative subconscious alerts you every time there is something that can get you to that destination.
Interesting.
So although people think, well, I don't know, Mike, I don't know if it's going to be 10 or 100. Let's pick a number that you believe with some comfort in your ability, in your team to get you from. Now, we don't need to know all the detail. We set off and we course correct. But that's too broad a range. So part of the 3-year planning is to say, look, what's realistic? Where would you be disappointed if we didn't get to in 3 years? So I know if we still had one, I'd be really disappointed. I'd like to think we could get to 20. But I'm more than confident, and Charlotte's more than confident, to set a goal to say we'll have a dozen nurseries in 3 years' time. But it's got to be your number. I'm not trying to push you into that because, I know people, even who I'm mentoring now, I say, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire in 8 years. And, that's their goal. And I completely believe it. Now, I mean, another person, and they might just say, I just want to be able to pay my house off and do this. And someone who's a millionaire that wants to be a billionaire is an abject failure. Someone who is a teacher that loves being a teacher is more successful than that millionaire because they're where they want to be in life. They're achieving what they want to achieve in life, and that's their goal. So we've got to find your goals, Charlotte's goals, converge them, because equally it might be that you're thinking 100 and she's thinking 10. And then you've got two people, the head and the heart are in completely different places, which ends up to mental health issues and all sorts of things. So we want to get them lined, we want to get them converged, and we want to get to a future state of metrics that you both buy into and is a destination that we want to go for. So that's how many nurseries. And then we start to expand that what other metrics might we measure it by. And what you don't want is 12 nurseries that are losing money. So what we might then say is, where are we currently? The nursery is turning over
400 grand a year.
400 grand a year. It's got 30 to 35 children it employs.
14 people, 12 people, let's say.
12 people. Do you know what the EBITDA is currently?
It's about 60k a year.
So about 60k net profit. So what we say is, they're the metrics by today. That's our current state, our future state. Imagine, and just dream with me a little bit. We go forward 3 years, because we've got a really detailed focus map. We could probably get 5 years of achievement in that time. And that's what I've found over 20 years of mentoring, advising different businesses, but certainly the last 10 working on this mapping system. And I've helped homeless people change their circumstances. I've helped celebrities, and I've helped businesses, small businesses. I've helped divisions of large businesses like Coca-Cola and Tesco's and companies like that, global businesses. But what we do need is to say, okay, we've got some metrics here. Let's dream forward a little bit. What would that 400,000 turnover be like, do you think? Where would you hope it would be, aim for it to be?
I think because the issue with nurseries is that you have staff to children ratios, and you can only have a specific amount of children per square metre of floor space within your property. So it's not like we could say, right, we've got 30 children in the nursery now, but we're going to get that up to 50, because you physically can't. You only have a limited amount of space.
So growth will come out of more nurseries.
So growth will come out of expanding that one into a new premises, or buying more nurseries and expanding the group. So that's how we're going to grow. The other part of this specific nursery is that they have a forest school, which I'm not sure if you know about kind of what that is, but basically it's a separate kind of environment within a woodlands or a forest, where they teach the children outdoor learning, using tools, being amongst nature. No,
actually, on Secret Millionaire, I did Newark Adventure Playground. And they've got an outside school like that. It's in like a prefab, but they teach them all of the outside. They talk about the environment. They talk about all of those things.
And it's really popular. It's really, really popular. There are forest schools at the moment in our area, and all of them are fully booked. Like, you really struggle to get places in them. So we know that the forest school is something that we can expand, because at the moment they only hold one session a week for the nursery children and one session for the general public. Now, we think that we can put sessions on every day, or even twice a day. So we can take the current income from the forestry school and maybe times it by 5.
So to me, that's where we start to look at a business, and what we say is, If I was a heating engineer, let's say, and I'm currently fitting boilers generally, I want to diversify my business slightly and use those same skills to move into renewables.
Yeah.
Or if I'm Cadbury's, I've got dairy milk, but I also want to grow crunchy as a product kind of thing.
Yeah.
So even though it's complementary in that it's in the same sector, it's the same skill set, it's a different target audience that needs its own marketing and so on. So, so in that, are you saying that in this current nursery that you're starting with, you can have 30 to 35 children, but you could use that forestry bit to bring in 300 children across a week in different slots or something
potentially.
like that?
Yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't.
So what we want to get to then is, what does that look like in the future? And I know this is like, it's uncomfortable for people, partly because we're asking them to be very specific when they don't know what the future is going to bring. They don't know what challenges. And even though you can never exactly follow a map, if we've got a clear route of how we're going to get from where we are to where we want to be, even it, like a sat nav, I put the postcode in and it works it all out. Or I give it to a taxi driver and he knows or she knows how they're going to get there. But even if we hit a traffic jam or something happens along the way, if you've got a clear route, it's just a small bit that we need to bypass or divert around. So equally, let's set a clear goal. And what I say is we set our goals in concrete, but our plans in sand. So if we had to have some concrete goals and you had to kind of like make a commitment now about where you think that's going to be, and it is amazing that when you make a commitment, you then find out how to do it. Or your taxi driver, you give them an address, they'll work out how to get there. You know, your creative subconscious, give it a goal that you're not like think that's crazy pie in the sky. And even sometimes then people do achieve it. But what does it look like?
Well,
so
for
we
the
could say, what's the income from the nurseries? What's the income from the
so at the moment, the forest school, I think it makes about 500 quid a week in income. So not a lot, but I think that we can increase that by 5-fold. And that's by holding
3 years or in the current
within 6 months.
So in one nursery, we can take it from £500 a week to £2,500 to £3,000 a week.
I believe so.
But you want more than one forestry school, or you want to buy nurseries and add forestry.
Exactly. So the forest school is very important for us because it really fits into what our ethos is and our vision for the group that we want to create, because we're very interested in outdoor learning and nature, and that's kind of an inspiration.
And that also, me just thinking aloud here, from nurseries that I've known, and I worked with a few over the last few years, and a few apps that support nurseries and so on over the last few years. That gives you a USP as well.
Exactly.
Because if I've got a choice between this nursery and this nursery, and this nursery can give my child some outside skills, some additional curriculum areas of knowledge, and actually getting some outside air, fresh air and so on as well, is more important. But
so we hope that every nursery that we come to buy in the future has a provision for a forest school or outdoor space where we can create that kind of learning. So that's going to be our formula, is the nursery, and the nursery is going to have specific ways that we educate the children, and that can be inspired by Montessori or Reggio, and there's a process, it's called loose parts, basically, where children work with loose toys and that kind of thing. So we're going to be quite specific in our kind of the way that we operate our nursery. People will recognise us for the way that we do it, and the forest school is going to be important. So when it comes to looking at new venue or new premises, we're going to make sure that there's that provision. So that will be what people will hopefully know us for.
And just thinking aloud from you here, often when you get two streams of a business or multiple streams of a business, obviously it gives it more security. But you will find that some streams can grow in their own right. So let's say that, I'm going to pick a number here, but it needs to be you and Charlotte. But let's say we said, okay, in 3 to 5 years' time, we're going to want 10 nurseries. I'm hearing, I think, that you could have 10 nurseries that you own that have got forestry schools attached, because that's an important part of your concept that you want to aim to. But equally, you could take that as a concept, you could probably take that as a brand, you could probably take that as a kind of franchise into another 100 nurseries
100%.
that you don't own, and you just give them the format, the structure, the branding, and the templates to run that school. Would that be an area that
I think that's
you'd add to that?
I think that's spot on. I think that's spot on. The forest school is where we can really create something special, and there's no reason why we couldn't franchise that to other businesses around the country. So in effect, as a mentor, what I'm trying to do, and your brain is fighting, is I'm trying to say, so how many is it? Is it 10 nurseries? How much is, and that's an interesting thing to understand, because we have a fear of failure, firstly.
So we don't want to say it's going to be 10 nurseries and find out it's only 3.
Yeah.
And that's kind of this world of X Factor and social media exposing people's failings and everything. So that's part of the reason I wrote Failure Breeds Success, is that everything we've ever been good at, we're rubbish at to start with. We get up, fall down, get up, fall down. When we're learning to walk, get up, fall down, get up. We don't think, I'm clearly not meant to do this, so I'm just going to sit down on my bum for the rest of my life. Our desire to walk is so intense, and the fact that everyone else is walking, we want to do that. And then whether it's riding a bike, learning a lesson, computer games, all these things. But we get a bit hurt by failure as we get older, so we'd almost rather not tell anyone a goal that we're aiming for, or lock into we want to keep growing, kind of broadness, than lock it down. But it is just like that taxi driver analogy, that if we can say, well, I'll tell you what, there's no doubt in my mind I'm going to have at least 10. I'm going to aim for 10. And I reckon the forestry schools, we could have that in 40 others. So we could have 10 nurseries and 50 forestry schools, 10 of which we own and operate ourselves as the kind of core learning. Now,
so I think that I have this thing. So obviously I'm originally from Peterborough. I moved to London 12 years ago, and I'd lived there for 10 years. But I've recently moved back to Peterborough. So now I have this thing where I want to build the biggest nursery group in Peterborough, because Peterborough is my legacy and it's my hometown. It's where my parents are, and my dad and my uncle were businessmen in Peterborough. So I want to continue that legacy. So I want people to recognise our name for what we create. So it might sound silly, but I want to build the biggest nursery group in Peterborough. And I think the current biggest nursery group has about 15 branches.
Who would that be?
I think it's Stars Day Nursery.
Okay.
I'll double check that, but I think it's Stars.
So as we're building the business, as we're building a map, if you like, a strategic transition map, and we're building a business, one of the things that we want to be is kind of obsessively focused on where we're going. But I often describe that as be like, if you imagine you're driving a car, if you're meandering along at 10, 20 miles an hour, you can probably spend a lot of time looking at what's going on here, a lot of time looking at what's going on. The faster you want to grow, the more you need to be future focused. But even in a supercar, you've got a rear view mirror and you've got 2 side view mirrors. They might only be 2 or 3% of the available visual and 3 or 4% of the available visual. And that's the proportion that you should give it. So it's like 90% plus is where we're going, what we're doing, what we want to achieve. But it is really important to know what's going on around you if you're driving the car, using that analogy, for your own safety, and what's coming up behind, or what you can learn from behind. So equally, part of any business is understanding those competitors and having that detail and knowing, like, this one's got 13, this one's got 10. From what I can look to company house and the accounts there, they're making money, they're losing money, partly because they might be future nurseries that you buy, but partly they're the metrics by which, if you can say, our current nursery, if we look at that, is making about 15% margin on turnover. When I look on company's house, it looks like they're making 20%. And then you ask yourself, what is it they're doing differently, better, best that I can emulate? Because if I can grow the number of nurseries, if I can grow the turnover of the nursery by adding different services within that, whether it's a forestry school, and I can achieve the same kind of margin they are, I get growth within my margin plus growth within my business. So, and it's not trying to catch you out. I mean, it's just part of them. But when someone says, I think they got that, it's like, let's get this stuff, let's get it smashed out, because that if you are driving this business forward, and you are going to, we've got all our focus on there, but we need to know what's going on behind. We need to know what's going on beside, if we want to be growing it in the best possible way and the broadest possible sense. So when we're looking at a transition map, is where are we today, where are we going, what areas we got to work on, competitor analysis, if you like, or best practice emulation might be one of those segments. And we're looking at, not just in Peterborough, we might say there's a world-class nursery, or I'm sure there's nursery awards, and that, the 2 winning nurseries of this year's nursery awards were these. It's like, let's get in there, let's find out what is it they're doing, how can we emulate that?
There are competitors that we've looked at that have won awards, and they're 20 minutes from where we are, and they're people that we kind of almost look up to, and they're people that we want to aspire to be like, but obviously better and bigger. So we have looked at that. But the question that I probably would ask you is, if I set this goal of saying, okay, we want to build the biggest and best nursery group in Peterborough, how long should that take us? If we have to get 15 branches or more, or 20 branches, do I want to do that in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years? That's where I struggle a little bit. Do I want to do it by the time I'm 40?
And when goal setting, it does always have to come from you. Now, I might sort of direct you or challenge you to try and bring that out, and then it can't just be you, because you two are partners. And if you've got one partner, whether they're, obviously you're married, but whether you've got 3 or 4 partners in a business, and one believes we should be here and one believes we should be here and one believes you've all got to get aligned first. It's got to be your goal. But what I would say is, I've worked with businesses that have quadrupled in 6 months. Wow. I've worked with businesses that have only got 5% growth in a year, and they're happy with 5%. They just want this really, because actually high growth burns a lot of cash. So a business that gets high growth needs much more funding than a business with slow growth. So then we're talking about the money. So to answer your question, what we then look at is we start with the end in mind, which is the Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People principle. If we start with the end in mind and we know where you think you would want to be, like to be, aim to be, then we can say, okay, if we've got to go from here to there in 3 years, what's the likely scale up? So let's say it was 1 nursery to 10. We could say, well, what does that look like? Is that a straight line growth? Or do you think we take the first year to build a build a base, make this the best possible nursery that we can make this nursery by learning from others? And then once we've got that kind of format, that template, we can go out and buy, knowing we can just put that system in place. So it might be, let's say this was nurseries as part of your plan. We might say, okay, we want to have 10, we're starting at 1, and actually I don't mind if we've still got 1 after year 1. But by year 2, I think that should be 4, and then we're going to really have known that we've not only taken 1 and improved it, but we've applied what we've learned in the 1 across 3 more, and we've seen it is scalable. We've seen that the format is transferable, and we can then scale up and get 6 in last year. And what then happens, because we set a goal, it starts with the end in mind, we set 10, whether that was the right number or not, it doesn't kind of matter in the planning process initially, because it then says, okay, well, what does that look like? What might that look like? Well, and we've agreed it's the 1 and the 4, let's say. We haven't agreed, but I'm saying we're going for it. We then say, look at finance and legal, and any business, the numbers never lie, so you've got to get the finances right and everything. But what you can say is, how much this one's going to cost you, if you like, based on the turnover, the EBITDA, and what price they're asking for. So if you were to buy, and we know we can build that, what do you think you're going to have to spend to build it? We can add some sums in there that we look at. We can then say, well, if we're going to buy another 3, what money will we need in year 2? And if we're going to buy 6 in year 3, what money might we need? And then we work with an accountant or RFD, and we say, okay, these are the sort of monies to purchase or acquire those businesses. But equally, what amount of that are we going to have to borrow or put more funds into, and what amount of it can be generated from our EBITDA that we're getting along the way? Because businesses go bust more because of lack of cash than lack of sales or opportunity. So we always want to make sure the money's there ready should the opportunity arise, because you might find some of the competitors that are really ideal for you to take and transition. If they suddenly become available in 6 months, are you going to be ready? Have you got a backer in place? And the whole idea of starting with the end in mind, working on the areas, and this might be sales and marketing, this might be people. So we're looking at getting the best people, because winning teams only have the best players. So you don't need one bad apple in your 12 staff. It's work, all these things. Staff is an issue as well. But they all have to work on in unison. And if you know that this other one's award winning, do you know how to find the best people? Sadly, they're not at the job centre a lot of the time. And I think it's really sad. I've been there at the point where I've had to go there, but often they're being looked after somewhere else. So sometimes it means you've got to go and find those people and steal them, attract them. So this is our biggest challenge, by the way. Well, and on the people, so what I work on is a principle of, when it comes to people, I've never seen a great business that hasn't got great people and great people policies. But I simplify it to a really simple, when we're working on that piece. How do we attract the best people? What's our approach to training the best people? How do we motivate them, and how do we retain them? And that becomes an ongoing cycle, because just because someone has been attractive, has got training, has been motivated, doesn't mean you'll keep them, because someone else might be able to try and steal them. So there's always this constant process of, are they still attracted to work here? Are we recognizing they're getting better and moving up? Are we keeping their training up to date? Are we giving them the incentive schemes or the environment that motivates them? And are we going to keep retaining them? And if we understand what it is about this particular type of business and the type of person who works in it, at whatever level we're looking for at that point, if we know how to attract them, we know what training they need to make them the best possible person and to motivate them, we've given them the packages that motivate them and the incentive scheme to retain them, because we've got this ongoing bonus figure. If we're constantly looking at as a key part of our map, and you can see we're looking at, the physical numbers of nurseries, and within that you might have the two streams, which is the sort of base nursery and the forest school and so on. And we look at the different strategies for that, because we might go 1 to 10 nurseries, but we might get 5 of the forestry schools going to 15, going to whatever it is. Yeah. So we put these numbers in. That will then drive the other elements of the map, because if you're getting more forestry schools, what's the sales and marketing that gets those other nurseries to want that nursery school? How do you sell that? What people do you need to do that job, and what are the cost of the people to grow your business? So the whole reason that the map generally converges like this is because every area of the business is interdependent on the other areas.
And that's really interesting, because I never thought of them as two separate businesses. I always thought that the forest school just belongs to the nursery, but I never actually thought that if we get the forest school really good, there's no reason why we can't scale that up to other places and other nurseries that we don't own. So it's really interesting.
Well, and that's where the mapping becomes useful, because if we looked at that and we start to get into the finances of it and the complexity of it and the marketing of it and the demand for it, what we might find is we can grow that quicker, and that might fund the purchasing of the nurseries.
True.
Because people are good at running nurseries, and or they have got a good nursery if they've got one, and they know exactly what to do. And you're saying, do you realise you could have another £50,000 a year of income if you added this? And if you added this, you could attract people from the other schools in the area, which might then get the families to bring their next children into your so it becomes this kind of rolling feedback opportunity. And you know what, you don't need to worry about it. We'll give you this package, this franchise that shows you exactly how to do it, and you might get an ongoing income from much less cost. But until we do the map, start with the end in mind, work back, roll it all forward, look at the interdependence, which takes normally, I could do this in 1 day or 8 or 9 hours with somebody, but we start the process in this first hour. You go away and you think about where is it I do want to be? Charlotte, where is it we want to be? Do we have belief that we could get there, especially if we've got the help of someone like Mike, and we've got a good FD, and we're getting the right people, and we've got a good marketing team or person that we can bring in. And then we're back checking until we get to a point where we see that it is properly joined up.
Yeah.
And we can see and believe that if we do those, deliver those actions or initiatives in each of these areas, and it feels like a lot, but in reality, you have 5 or 6 actions in each area across a year.
Okay.
And then what I do from this is, because we start with the end in mind, we have to do a 3-year map to work back to the detail. Then we say, okay, we then know what we've got to do in year 1. We then look at that year 1 and say, let's break it down even further. If we had 4 quarters to achieve that, what are we going to do in each quarter?
Okay.
And then what I do is then break the quarter into a month. And I can even break, so this, let's say it was December, January, February. I can then break that, if I want, using this same grid, into weekly actions. So, if you look here, I don't need to get into the detail, but what I always keep with me, I keep a copy in my bag, I keep a copy at home, I keep a copy in my gym, because as I'm running, I often have it on the treadmill. I'm just looking, what have I got to do this week? What have I got to do this week?
That's interesting.
So, I have my 3-year map, I have my 4-quarter plan, even down to my weekly plan. Now, when I break it down into that weekly bite size, there's like 1 or 2 actions I have to do this week. And so it takes all the anxiety out of a business growth, because we think there's loads to do.
Yeah.
Well, in 3 years, there is.
Yeah.
But across 3 years, you could have 500 people working for you. So we've not got to do it all ourselves. We could have a management team of 5 or 6 people. We've not got to do it all ourselves.
Okay.
But we can boil it down to get from here to where we are, what do I need to do today, this week, this month?
Okay.
But the first point and the first stage of the mentoring is, we've got to start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Without a clear vision and a very specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timed. So they say a goal is a dream with a date on it.
Yeah.
So we start with a dream. We then put a date on it, and then we work out how to get from where we are to where we want to be.
Okay.
So to sort of bring this session to a close, what I would say is the next stage is, before we catch up for another session, is to go back and sit with Charlotte, and she can come along next session if she wants, and say, okay, look, go through some of what we talked. I'll give you a copy of my book, which also guides you through how to do the planning, if you like, and say, where is it we want to be in 3 years? But we got to try and be as specific.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the detail. When I jump in a cab, I don't need to know exactly how he's going to get there. I just set the destination.
Yeah.
Our creative subconscious is one of the most powerful things to drive us forward if we give it specific goals.
Okay.
And equally, it's a bit like a sat nav. You put PE10ND or whatever into a sat nav. You don't need to see or want to see or have to see any of the detail.
Yeah.
All you need to know is what turn next.
Okay.
What turn next? And if we can start with the end in mind, work a one-page strategy back, and then break it down into bite-sized pieces, it is like having the sat-nav that says, all you need to do is turn left at the next junction, or go straight ahead at the roundabout. And that's where we're trying to break it down. The challenge with most businesses is that they don't have a clear destination. It's like, take me north. I want to be successful.
Yeah.
I want to be better than I was last year. I want to lose weight. But if we don't say I want to lose this much weight by this date, I don't know what action I've got to take today.
True.
If we don't say I want 10 nurseries, it doesn't steer me or my creative subconscious to find those nurseries, to think about the area that those nurseries are in, to think about the cost of that, to think about the people I need.
True.
And all we're trying to do is to tease the normal behavior of brains, which is not to overcommit, not to set or write onto paper a goal that others might see that we might fail.
Yeah.
Get it down there. Written goals, and there's been lots of surveys that show the 3 to 5% of people who write goals down out-earn the other 97%.
Really?
Written goals, I have never... People who say it's in my head, I know where I want to go, I know what I need to do. To know and not to do is not to know.
Okay.
To know and not to do is not to know. To not write a goal down is to not really have a goal. To have a goal that is vague is to have an unclear destination. It's really hard to set a plan for an unclear destination. So what we're trying to do is to get that in place.
Okay.
So the first step, if you like, on the mentoring process is go back and think about, in 3 years' time, where do I want to be?
Okay.
Turn that into some smart goals around those metrics, and I'll email you some of those metrics that we follow. It's in the book as well.
Thank you.
And then come back and we start to, if you like, interrogate your draft.
Okay.
So I can say, is this complementary to that, or does it conflict with that? Yeah.
Would you ever put age-specific goals in place? Like, I would like to have...
Yeah, people often say by the time I'm 40 or whatever.
Yeah, but I don't know how, if that works or not. Should we be saying, right, I'd like to have the biggest nursery group in Peterborough by the time I'm 40? Yeah. I'm 32 now, so that gives me 8 years.
So yes is the simple answer. And often it's a bit like people often set New Year's resolutions on, on the first of day of the year. Well, actually, you can set a goal from any day.
Yeah.
Equally, it is a big day for people, 30, 40, 50, and so on. Or by the time I retire, I want this, this, and this. If that's the thing that drives you, and that's what I say is, I don't give people these areas. I give them a template. It's your goal, the way that you want to work. The only thing I'd say about setting something for 8 years is that it's a bit like I could do with losing a couple of stone, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay. If I say, when are you going to lose it by, Mike? I'm going to do it by this time next year.
Yeah.
I could do nothing for 9 months and then starve myself. So it's not enough to make me act today.
So we need to be more specific.
Yeah, equally, if I say I want to lose 2 stone this week, well, which leg am I going to cut?
Yeah.
So it's got to be a time scale that feels like I can believe in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
People who just set 1 year goals, the challenge for that often is they become incrementalized. They don't dream big enough.
Okay.
8 years feels a bit big. So what I do is try and say, to be there in 8 years, where would we be in 3?
Okay. So
and in reality, what we do is, if we imagine this, we don't change we set our goals in concrete and our plans in sand. We don't change them every 5 minutes, because that would be like if you were a hurdler, lifting or lowering the hurdle to what you're feeling like today.
Yeah.
Actually, we've got to jump that high.
Yeah.
And if we're failing today, we've got to say, why are we failing? Is it our nutrition? Is it our energy? Is it our sleep? And so on. Equally, we don't change our goals every 5 minutes.
Okay.
They are in sand in terms of they're flexible, but where possible, we only review this once a year. But if you imagine we've got this goal, in a year's time or coming up to a year, we say, okay, let's look at another 3 years. has there been something that is so changed that we need to change our strategy? COVID hitting could be one thing. We enter a deep recession could be another. In which case, we treat it as an AOB on our strategy and say, okay, this has happened. This was unforeseen. What do we need to do differently?
Okay.
But other than that, we just, each year, we're looking forward 3 years. We're looking forward 3 years. So if you like, we'll pass through our 3-year goal, by which time we'd have had 3-year maps, if you like.
True.
And so we will be getting towards that 8. So what I would do is start with the 8 end in mind, which is your 8, set it as a kind of quite specific goals, but even saying the best in Peterborough, best by what? The best as in you get the best ratings,
True.
the most profitable, the biggest. So you've got to even define that and make that specific, measurable, attainable, that SMART acronym, which I'll send you and tell you more about, or you can just Google SMART,
Okay.
SMART goals, it explains it. But then and we set that like as a long-term destination. It's a bit like saying I want to climb Everest.
Yeah.
But Christ, that's a long way away from where I am today.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first set a goal in the next 3 years to have climbed Kilimanjaro, Annapurna, Ruwenzori, or whatever it is, because I can see myself doing them. And even then, when that's a 3-year goal, I'm going to set a goal this year to do the 3 peaks or something. So I'd say 8 years is just a long time it won't motivate you to take action today in the same way.
Okay. So we focus on the 3 years.
We're focused on the 3 years, and each year you go forward another 3 years as you pass through your first 3-year goal.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds great.
Great.
Yeah,
well,
let's do that. So we'll go away, think about what we think is achievable, but we don't want to limit ourselves, obviously. And then we'll come back to you with our goals, and I guess we then work from there.
Brilliant. And then just as a, to bring this, is there any sort of burning questions you had that you wanted me to answer during this mentoring session? Or are there any things that are sort of already niggling where you're thinking, I can see what you're saying, Mike, but, is there any buts in there? That
there's nothing in there that really scares me. The things that I probably would want to lean on you a little bit on are the actual fundamentals of running a business, because whilst I am in business now, I don't have staff. What I do is very much me and my business partner, we're doing deals, we're making money, but I'm about to get into something where I'm going to be responsible for 12 people and bills and property and everything like that. So how do we deal with the staff? How do we deal with marketing for an existing business? How do we improve these things? So it's actually the things that are really fundamental to running a successful business, I think, is where we need a bit of help. I have a business brain, and I can use my intuition and stuff, but
I can help you with that, obviously, and that's why I mentor a lot of businesses. We learn a lot, but the role of a mentor is to try and say, where do we want to go? How do we want to get there? And then what are the things that might get in the way? So that might be, I haven't got skills here yet.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, well, I got a degree in this, or I did well at school, I've done my education. The reality is, if we approach sort of our life to lifelong learning and lifetime adapting or getting new skills, what we say is, I don't have that skill. Now the question is then, do you want to attain that skill? Is it something you think you can have a passion or a desire to, or do we employ the best people to do that?
Okay.
So one of the stories I love is about Henry Ford. Left school at 14, couldn't read and write. The New York Times called him stupid, and so he sued them. Now in court they defended himself, and they said he can't read, he can't write. He left school at 14, therefore de facto he is stupid. He said, I've got a box like this in my office, and he defended himself, and it was a box with 6 buttons. And he said, I may not have all the skills that make you say, or knowledge that make you say, I'm intelligent. But what I do have is these 6 buttons. If I press that, the best sales brain in the country, the best salesperson in the country will be in my office in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If I press that button, the best financial brain in America, if not the world, will be in my office. And he went through the buttons. And so I guess where I'm going with that analogy is, you don't need to learn all those skills. You don't need to do all those things. When we got it on a map and we realized we do need financial, we do need sales and marketing, we do need the right people, is part of our plan then becomes getting the best possible people that you can get to give you the support, especially in areas where you don't have a natural strength. Okay. Or if it's you say, well, I don't have that, but I really want to get it, it becomes part of our map.
Yeah, because I feel like I would have.
Evolve when we get those skills.
Yeah, I feel like I would have the natural strength, but I just don't have the experience. So I feel like I would be a good leader, and I feel like I would be a good MD, or and I feel like I would be good at marketing, but I don't have that experience that other nurseries would have. So I guess it's a process of learning those skills.
And if I was a surgeon and you needed surgery today, and I said to you, I'm going to become a great surgeon one day, but I don't have the experience at the moment. But will you let me practice?
Yeah.
You think, you must be bloody crazy. Of course I'm not going to let you practice. So part of the transition and the transition mapping is saying you could have all of those skills in 3 years.
Yeah.
You could do a degree course alongside your business, and you could gain whatever skills it is that you believe are key to this business in that 3-year period.
True.
Or you could just employ somebody to do that.
Yeah.
Certainly, whilst you don't have the experience, the recognition is we're buying this business. We could have this in 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So what I do need is to make sure I've got the best possible people now that have got the experience, because no one's going to trust me. I'm not qualified yet.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to trust myself because I'm not qualified yet.
Yeah.
So I am going to make sure we employ those people. If part of the transition is we transition them out and we transition ourselves in because we gain the skills, or we realize that they're not the right person for where the business is growing, I need someone else to come in. A real key in business is getting the best people. Winning teams only have the best player. The key word in that statement is only. Winning teams only have the best players.
Okay.
So, you take a world-class football team, if one of the 11 aren't playing well, the team lose.
Yeah.
If one of the 11 are sent off, the team lose. They might be a world-class footballer, they're being paid £20 million, they're worth £20 million, but if they ain't working in that team, we need to cut them loose.
Yeah.
So winning teams only have the best players. If you're not the best player in one of the skills, you can have the overview on the business, even if you haven't got great skill set, by being a Henry Ford and making sure I've got the best accountants, I've got the best lawyers. That manager's really good, but actually maybe there's someone at the award-winning one who is best that I could employ or attract across who will take us to the next stage.
Okay.
Now, you have to work within people policies and so on. But winning teams, best players.
No, I like that.
And that's yourself included. And sometimes part of the failure of some business is they're not the best player.
Yeah.
And a recognition that, I'd like to think I need to be the boss because I bought the business. Sometimes say, I'll do this role and I'll employ someone who's much better than me to do that role.
Yeah, and that's where, when we first decided to buy the nursery, Charlotte and I sat down and we said, well, what are our roles going to be? And we made a list. We said, right, I'm going to be responsible for finance and accounting because I'm fairly good with numbers and I'm comfortable with numbers. Charlotte's going to be responsible for the children and the education and the vision and strategy. She will be responsible for the parent liaison because she's great with people like her. And I'll probably take care of the business development and the marketing because that's where I have experience within the property side. So we did split those roles up. So I do think that's really important that we recognise what each other is going to do.
It's also about making sure you ask for help and get the best help.
Yeah.
Now, if you are looking to build a business slowly, as I said, you've got plenty of time.
Yeah.
There's no rush. If you're driving at 150 miles an hour because you're setting big goals, you can't do all of that on your own. You probably need to have some other people. And I love the interview with that I saw with Steve Jobs a few months back. It's an old interview, but someone was saying, what exactly do you do? This is Steve Jobs. That's a bit, what exactly do you do? Because you're actually not a programmer. You're not actually a marketer. You're not actually a salesperson. So what exactly do you do? And what really struck me, he said, well, do you know what? He said, they're like all of the musicians in the orchestra.
Yeah.
I can't play that instrument. I can't play that instrument. I can't play that instrument, but I can conduct the orchestra.
Yeah.
And if we can bring ourselves to this point where we see ourselves as a conductor, even if we've got a great skill set in one area, because we get that value of perspective, we can have an orchestra that plays in more harmony together, and we can observe and see and direct all of them. The danger is if we do one of them as we get scale, we're not directing the rest. True. And we're probably not even seeing or hearing the rest. So if you want a business to scale, you don't need all the individual skills. You do need to become a great conductor director.
Okay.
And on that, I'll call it a wrap here today. And
thank you.
I look forward to seeing you and Charlotte and seeing where we take that. But,
I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you found that useful or you'd like to find out any more, click on the link and we can send you some more information. Thanks very much for joining Success is a System.